The room was suffocating, the air thick with the weight of unspoken betrayals. I stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, my heart pounding like a war drum, staring into the eyes of the man who had once vowed to love me forever. Daniel, my ex-husband, sat across from me, his smug grin faltering as I slid a single document toward him. 3 years ago, he'd thrown me out of our home like I was nothing more than a discarded piece of furniture. I could still hear the door slamming behind me, the echo of his cold voice telling me I wasn't enough. Not for him, not for the life he wanted. Back then, I was broken, a woman stripped of her confidence, her dreams, and her dignity. But today, in this sleek corporate boardroom, I was someone else entirely. Today, I was Eleanor Kane, the woman who had clawed her way back from the ashes of his betrayal. And today, I would make him pay. The negotiations were for a merger. His company, Sterling Enterprises, was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and my firm, Phoenix Ventures, held the lifeline he so desperately needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had called me weak was now begging for my help, though he'd never admit it. His tailored suit couldn't hide the beads of sweat on his forehead, and his eyes darted nervously to the papers in front of him. "Eleanor," he began, his voice dripping with false charm, "let's keep this professional. We both want what's best for our companies." I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips that made his jaw tighten. "Oh, Daniel," I said, my voice steady as steel, "this isn't just business. This is personal. 3 years earlier, I had been a different woman. I was the devoted wife, the one who planned dinner parties, ironed his shirts, and believed in the fairy tale of our marriage. Daniel was my world, and I thought I was his. We'd built a life together, or so I thought. The house in the suburbs, the vacations to Paris, the promises of a family. But then came the late nights, the excuses, the lipstick stains on his collar that weren't mine. I ignored them at first, clinging to the hope that love could fix anything. Until the night he came home, his face hard as stone, and told me to leave. "You're holding me back, Eleanor," he'd said, his voice devoid of warmth. "I need someone who can keep up with me, someone who fits my vision. You're not that woman." I begged. I cried. I humiliated myself trying to hold on to a man who had already let me go. But he didn't budge. He packed my bags, called a cab, and sent me away with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart. I ended up in a cheap motel, staring at the peeling wallpaper, wondering how I'd fallen so far. But that was the old Eleanor. The new Eleanor had spent those 3 years rebuilding herself, piece by painful piece. I'd taken the last of my savings and enrolled in business school, working nights as a waitress to pay the bills. I graduated top of my class, landed a job at a startup, and within 2 years, I'd co-founded Phoenix Ventures. My company was small but fierce, a rising star in the tech industry, and now, it was the key to Daniel's survival. Back in the boardroom, Daniel's lawyer, a wiry man with a nervous tic, cleared his throat. "Miss Kane, your terms are unconventional. Sterling Enterprises is prepared to offer a 30% stake in exchange for the merger." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. 30%, I said, letting the words hang in the air. "That's cute. Try again." Daniel's face reddened. "Eleanor, be reasonable. You know what's at stake here." "Oh, I know exactly what's at stake," I replied, my voice low and sharp. "Your company is drowning in debt. Your investors are jumping ship. And without my resources, Sterling Enterprises will be nothing but a memory by next quarter." The room fell silent. His team exchanged uneasy glances, and I could feel the power shifting in my favor. This wasn't just about business. It was about justice. Daniel had taken everything from me, but now I held the cards. "I'm offering you a lifeline," I continued, tapping the document in front of him. "But it comes with conditions. You'll give Phoenix Ventures a 70% stake in Sterling Enterprises. You'll step down as CEO, and you'll sign a non-compete clause that keeps you out of this industry for 5 years. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear in them. "You can't be serious," he sputtered. "That's corporate suicide." "No, Daniel," I said, leaning forward. "It's karma." The memory of that night 3 years ago still burned in my mind. After he threw me out, I wandered the streets, my suitcase dragging behind me like a weight I couldn't shed. I had no family to turn to, no friends close enough to burden with my shame. But then I met Clara, a bartender at the dive bar where I ended up that night. She saw the tears in my eyes, the defeat in my posture, and instead of looking away, she poured me a drink and listened. "You're not done yet," she'd said, her voice firm but kind. "You're hurt, but you're not broken. Get up, Eleanor. Fight." Clara became my anchor, my confidant, the one who reminded me that I was more than Daniel's discarded wife. She pushed me to enroll in business school, celebrated every small victory, and when I launched Phoenix Ventures, she was there, cheering louder than anyone. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here, staring down the man who had tried to destroy me. In the boardroom, Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "You're trying to ruin me," he said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Ruin you?" I echoed, tilting my head. "No, Daniel. I'm giving you a chance to walk away with something. You didn't give me that courtesy." His lawyer tried to interject, but I raised a hand, silencing him. "Let me be clear," I said. "You have 24 hours to accept my terms, or I walk away, and Sterling Enterprises collapses. Your choice." The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel stared at me, his eyes searching for the woman he'd once known, the one who would have caved, who would have begged for his approval. But that woman was gone. I gathered my papers and stood, my heels clicking against the floor as I walked toward the door. 24 hours, I repeated, not looking back. "Don't test me." As I stepped into the hallway, my heart raced, but not with fear, with triumph. This was only the beginning. Daniel had no idea what I had planned next. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing off the boardroom's tension like a vault. My reflection stared back from the polished steel, calm, composed, a woman in control. But inside, my emotions churned like a storm, a mix of adrenaline and the ghosts of old wounds. I hadn't planned to confront Daniel so directly, not at first. When Phoenix Ventures was approached about a potential merger with Sterling Enterprises, I saw it as a business opportunity, nothing more. But the moment I learned Daniel was still at the helm, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just a deal. It was a chance to rewrite the story he'd forced upon me. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my life, and now I would show him what I'd become. Back at my office, Clara was waiting, her arms crossed and a mischievous grin on her face. "So," she asked, leaning against my desk, "how'd it go? Did you make him squirm?" I dropped my bag and sank into my chair, exhaling a laugh. "Oh, he squirmed. You should have seen his face when I laid out the terms." Clara clapped her hands, her eyes sparkling. "That's my girl. Tell me everything." I recounted the meeting, every word, every glance, every moment I'd held the upper hand. Clara listened, nodding, her pride in me palpable. She'd been there through the worst of it. The nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the days I doubted I could go on. She knew what this moment meant. "But you're not done, are you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not even close," I said, my voice firm. "This is just the opening move." The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel's lawyer. "We need to meet. Urgent." I smirked. I'd given him 24 hours, and it hadn't even been 12. He was panicking, just as I predicted. The meeting was set for noon at a neutral location, a sleek conference room in a downtown hotel. I arrived early, my team in tow, each of us dressed to intimidate. Daniel walked in 5 minutes late, his tie slightly askew, his confidence fraying at the edges. He wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman I recognized instantly, Vanessa, his new wife. Vanessa was everything I hadn't been, glamorous, poised, the kind of woman who turned heads. She'd been the one he'd chosen over me, the one he'd called his perfect match. Seeing her now, in her designer dress and flawless makeup, stirred something ugly in me. But I pushed it down. This wasn't about her. It was about him. "Eleanor," Daniel said, his voice tight, "let's talk this through. Your terms are excessive." Vanessa's eyes flicked to me, cold and assessing. "We're prepared to negotiate," she added, her tone clipped. "But we won't be strong-armed." I tilted my head, studying her. "Negotiate," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "I don't think you understand. I'm not here to haggle. You either accept my terms, or Sterling Enterprises is finished. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You're letting personal grudges cloud your judgment. Personal, I said, leaning forward. You made it personal when you threw me out of our home, Daniel. When you told me I wasn't enough. This is just business. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. Good. Let her feel it. Flashback to 2 years ago. I was still in business school, juggling classes and my waitressing job. One night, as I cleared tables at the diner, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Two men in suits were discussing Sterling Enterprises, Daniel's company. They mentioned rumors of financial trouble, mismanagement, risky investments, a CEO too focused on his ego to see the cracks forming. That was the moment I realized I could do more than survive. I could fight back. I threw myself into my studies, networked relentlessly, and when the opportunity came to co-found Phoenix Ventures, I seized it. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, it was all leading to this. To the day I'd face Daniel and show him I was more than enough. Back in the conference room, Daniel's lawyer slid a revised proposal across the table. We're offering 40%, he said, his voice cautious. And Daniel remained CEO. I didn't even glance at the paper. No, I said simply. My terms haven't changed. Daniel's face twisted with frustration. You're being unreasonable, Eleanor. You'll destroy everything I've built. You destroyed everything we built. I shot back. You don't get to play the victim now. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice low. You're bitter, she said. This isn't about business. It's about revenge. I met her gaze, unflinching. Call it what you want, I said. But I'm not the one who started this war. The room fell silent again. The tension so thick, it was almost tangible. Daniel's lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he waved him off, his eyes locked on mine. I could see the gears turning in his head, the realization that I wasn't bluffing. I held all the power, and he hated it. I need more time, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You have until 5 p.m., I replied. Not a minute longer. As I walked out, Vanessa's glare burned into my back, but I didn't care. This was my moment, and I wasn't backing down. The city skyline glittered through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, replaying every word of the meeting, every flicker of fear in Daniel's eyes. I had him cornered, and it felt good, better than I'd imagined. Back at Phoenix Ventures, my team gathered in the war room, a small, cluttered space we'd nicknamed for its role in our biggest battles. They were my family now, a group of misfits who'd believed in me when I barely believed in myself. There was Marcus, our tech genius, who'd coded our flagship product in a caffeine-fueled haze. Priya, our financial wizard, who'd saved us from collapse more times than I could count. And Clara, who'd left bartending to join my team as our head of operations. So, what's the play? Marcus asked, spinning in his chair. You really think he'll cave? He doesn't have a choice, I said, pacing. Sterling Enterprises is bleeding cash. Without us, they're done. Priya frowned, tapping her pen against her notepad. But what if he fights back? He's desperate, Eleanor. Desperate men do stupid things. I stopped pacing, my eyes narrowing. Let him try? We're ready. The truth was, I'd been preparing for this moment for years. After Daniel threw me out, I'd spent months piecing together the wreckage of my life. Clara had been my lifeline, but it was my own determination that kept me going. I'd learned to code, studied finance, and absorbed every business strategy one could find. When Phoenix Ventures launched, it wasn't just a company, it was my redemption. But Daniel's betrayal had left scars. Even now, with all my success, I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, hearing his voice, "You're not enough." Those words had haunted me, but they'd also fueled me. Every milestone, every deal, every step forward was proof that he was wrong. At 4:55 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Daniel's lawyer, requesting another meeting. I agreed, but this time, I chose the venue, my office. If Daniel wanted to negotiate, he'd do it on my turf. He arrived at 6 p.m., alone this time, his face drawn and tired. The swagger was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat across from me, his hands folded tightly in his lap. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low, "I've thought about your terms. They're harsh, but I'm willing to give you 50% and step down as CEO. That's my final offer." I leaned back, studying him. This was the man who'd broken me, who'd made me doubt my worth. And now, he was pleading for mercy. Part of me wanted to savor it, to drag this out and watch him squirm. But I wasn't here to play games. 50%, I said, my voice calm. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. It's a takeover." His jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake, Eleanor. You think you can just waltz in and—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his like a blade. "You don't get to lecture me. Not after what you did." He flinched, and for a moment, I saw something new in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or shame. But I didn't care. I slid another document across the table, this one outlining the final terms. 70%. Non-compete. And you're out. Sign it, or Sterling Enterprises is finished. He stared at the paper, his hands trembling. "You're destroying me," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "You destroyed yourself." Flashback to a year ago. Phoenix Ventures was on the verge of its first major deal, a contract that would put us on the map. I was terrified, convinced I'd fail, that Daniel's words were true. But Clara had pulled me aside, her hands on my shoulders, her eyes fierce. "You are enough," she'd said. "You've always been enough. Don't let him take that from you." Those words had carried me through. They were why I was here now, standing tall, refusing to back down. Daniel had tried to break me, but he'd only made me stronger. Daniel picked up the pen, his movements slow, deliberate. He signed the document, his signature shaky but legible. When he looked up, his eyes were hollow. "It's done," he said, his voice barely audible. I nodded, taking the paper. "Good. My team will handle the transition. You'll be out by the end of the week." He stood, his shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the sound of that door slamming, the weight of my suitcase, the coldness in his voice, and any pity I might have felt vanished. As he walked out, I leaned back in my chair, a smile tugging at my lips. This wasn't the end, not yet. There was one more move to make, and it would be the one that left him truly speechless. The office was quiet after Daniel left, the weight of his defeat lingering in the air. I sat alone, staring at the signed document, my fingers tracing the ink of his signature. It should have felt like a victory, but instead, it felt like a pause, a moment before the final act. Clara poked her head in, her expression cautious. "You okay, boss?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Better than okay. We did it." She grinned, stepping inside. "You did it." That man didn't know what hit him. But I wasn't done. The merger was only part of my plan. Daniel had taken more than my home and my dignity. He'd taken my trust, my belief in love, my sense of self. And while I'd rebuilt most of it, there was one piece left to reclaim. The next morning, I called a meeting with my board. They were a small but fierce group, each one handpicked for their loyalty and vision. I laid out the next phase of my plan, not just to absorb Sterling Enterprises, but to dismantle it. Piece by piece, we would sell off its assets, keeping only what aligned with Phoenix Ventures' mission. The rest, Daniel's legacy, would be gone. "It's risky," Priya said, her brow furrowed. "The market might see it as ruthless. It could hurt our reputation." "It's not about ruthlessness," I replied. "It's about survival. Sterling Enterprises is a house of cards, built on Daniel's ego. We take what's valuable and let the rest collapse." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "I like it. It's bold, and it sends a message." The board voted unanimously in favor. By the end of the day, we'd begun the process of dissecting Sterling Enterprises. It wasn't just about profit. It was about erasing the empire Daniel had built on lies. Flashback to 6 months ago, I'd been invited to speak at a women's leadership conference, a moment that felt like a pinnacle of my journey. Standing on that stage, I'd shared my story, not the polished version, but the raw, messy truth. The divorce, the motel, the nights I thought I'd never recover. The audience was silent, then erupted in applause. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "Your story saved me," she'd said. "I thought I was nothing after my husband left. But you showed me I can rebuild." That moment had clarified everything. My fight wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who'd been told she wasn't enough. And taking down Daniel's empire was part of that fight. A week later, the news broke. Phoenix Ventures had acquired Sterling Enterprises and was selling off its non-core assets. The business world buzzed with speculation, but I stayed silent, letting the headlines speak for themselves. Daniel's name was everywhere, tied to failure, to a company that had crumbled under his watch. I was in my office when Clara burst in, waving her phone. "Have you seen this?" she said, laughing. "They're calling it the corporate coup of the year." I glanced at the article she showed me, a smile tugging at my lips. "Good," I said. "Let them talk." But the real moment I was waiting for came later that day. A package arrived, unmarked, with a single letter inside. It was from Daniel. "Eleanor, I underestimated you. I thought you were weak, but I was wrong. You've won. I'm leaving the city, starting over somewhere else. I hope you find peace. Daniel." I read it twice, then set it down. No apology, no remorse, just an acknowledgement of his defeat. It wasn't enough, but it didn't need to be. I'd taken back my power, and that was all that mattered. That evening, I met Clara for drinks at the bar where we'd first met. The place hadn't changed much, same dim lighting, same sticky floors, but I was a different woman. We raised our glasses, toasting to victory, to resilience, to the future. "You did more than win," Clara said, her eyes shining. "You rewrote the story." I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. "And it's not over yet." The next phase was already in motion. Phoenix Ventures was growing, and I had plans, big ones. A new product launch, a partnership with a global tech giant, a foundation to support women entrepreneurs. Daniel's downfall was just the beginning. I was building something bigger, something that would outlast us all. As I sipped my drink, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, the one who'd stumbled into this bar with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. She was still part of me, but she no longer defined me. I was Eleanor Kane, and I was unstoppable. The weeks following the merger were a whirlwind. Phoenix Ventures was in the spotlight, our name on every business news outlet, our stock soaring. But beneath the success, I felt a quiet unease. I'd won, but at what cost? The victory was sweet, but it left a bitter aftertaste, like biting into fruit that looked perfect but was rotten at the core. I was in my office, reviewing the latest financial reports, when Priya knocked. "Got a minute?" she asked, her expression serious. "Always," I said, pushing the papers aside. "What's up?" She hesitated, then handed me a folder. "We found something. About Sterling Enterprises. You need to see this." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the documents. Emails, financial records, internal memos, all pointing to one thing. Daniel had been cooking the books. For years, he'd hidden losses, inflated profits, and misled investors. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was fraud. "This changes everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "If this goes public, Sterling Enterprises is done. And Daniel, he could face jail time." Priya finished, her tone grim. I leaned back, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to leak the documents, to let the world see Daniel for what he truly was. But another part, the part that still remembered the man I'd loved, hesitated. Was I ready to destroy him completely? Flashback to our wedding day. Daniel had looked at me like I was his entire world. We'd danced under the stars, promising forever. I'd believed in him, in us. Even now, knowing what he'd done, those memories stung. They reminded me that I hadn't just lost a husband, I'd lost a dream. But dreams could be rebuilt. I'd proven that. And this was a chance to close the chapter for good. I called an emergency meeting with my team. We sat around the war room table, the documents spread out before us. Marcus was the first to speak. "We have to go public," he said. "This isn't just about Daniel. It's about protecting our investors, our reputation." Priya nodded. "He's right. If we sit on this, and it comes out later, it'll look like we were complicit." Clara, always the voice of reason, leaned forward. But we need to be strategic. If we release this, it'll tank what's left of Sterling Enterprises. We'll lose any value we hope to salvage. I listened, weighing their words. They were right, all of them. But this wasn't just about business. It was about justice, about accountability. Daniel had built his empire on lies, and I wouldn't let him walk away unscathed. I'll handle it, I said finally. But we do this my way. The next day, I met with a reporter from a major business journal. I'd chosen her carefully, Sarah Nguyen, known for her integrity and her ability to tell a story that stuck. I handed her the folder, explaining everything. This stays anonymous, I said. Phoenix Ventures isn't the story. The truth is. Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the documents. This is big, Eleanor. Are you sure you want to do this? I've never been more sure, I replied. The story broke 2 days later. The headlines were brutal. Sterling Enterprises rocked by fraud allegations. Daniel's name was everywhere, his face plastered across every news site. Investors pulled out, the stock plummeted, and by the end of the week, Sterling Enterprises was in receivership. I watched it all from my office, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow washing over me. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To see him fall, to see justice served. But as I watched the news, I felt a pang of something I hadn't expected, closure. That night, Clara came over to my apartment, a bottle of wine in hand. You did it, she said, pouring us each a glass. You took him down. I took a sip, staring out at the city lights. It doesn't feel like I thought it would, I admitted. I thought I'd feel free. Clara tilted her head, studying me. You are free, Eleanor. You've been free since the day you decided to fight back. This was just the final nail. She was right. Daniel's downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was everything I'd built since he threw me out. Phoenix Ventures, my team, my strength. That was my legacy. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You win, Eleanor. I'm sorry. It was Daniel. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But then I deleted the message and set my phone down. He didn't deserve a response. Not anymore. One morning, as I sipped coffee in my office, Priya burst in, her eyes wide. You need to see this, she said, handing me her tablet. It was a blog post written by Vanessa, Daniel's wife. The title read, The Truth About the Woman Who Destroyed My Husband. My stomach twisted as I read her words, venomous, accusing me of jealousy, of orchestrating a personal vendetta. She painted herself as the victim, the loyal wife standing by her man. I set the tablet down, my hands steady. She's desperate, I said. Let her talk. Priya frowned. You sure? This could hurt us. People love a sob story. She doesn't have the facts, I replied. And the truth is already out there. Still, Vanessa's words stung. Not because they were true, but because they reminded me of the woman I used to be. The one who cared what people thought, who lived for approval. I wasn't that woman anymore, but the ghost of her lingered. That afternoon, I got a call from Sarah Nguyen, the reporter. Eleanor, I've got something you might want to hear, she said. Off the record. I leaned back in my chair. Go on. Vanessa's been shopping her story around, trying to get sympathy. But she's slipping. Sources say she knew about Daniel's fraud, maybe even helped cover it up. I sat up, my pulse quickening. You have proof? Not yet, Sarah said. But I'm digging. If I find something, you'll be the first to know. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. If Vanessa was complicit, it changed everything. She wasn't just the new wife. She was part of the lie that had propped up Daniel's empire. And if I could prove it, it would be the final blow. Flashback to a year after the divorce. I'd been working late at the startup, exhausted but determined. One night, I'd overheard a conversation between two colleagues about a competitor, Sterling Enterprises. They'd mentioned a woman, someone new in Daniel's life, someone who'd been seen at his side during high-stakes meetings. That was when I first heard Vanessa's name. Even then, I'd sensed she was more than just a trophy wife. She was ambitious, calculating, the kind of person who'd do whatever it took to win. Now, that instinct was paying off. I called Marcus and Priya into my office and laid out my plan. We need to dig into Vanessa, I said. Quietly. If she's involved, We need evidence. Marcus grinned. Corporate espionage? I'm in. Priya was more cautious. This is dangerous, Eleanor. If we're wrong, it could backfire. I'm not wrong, I said, my voice firm. She's hiding something. I can feel it. Over the next few days, my team worked in secret, combing through Sterling's records, cross-referencing emails and transactions. It was tedious, painstaking work, but Marcus was relentless. Late one night, he called me to the office, his voice buzzing with excitement. Found it, he said, pointing to his screen. Emails between Vanessa and Daniel's CFO, dated 2 years ago. They discuss adjusting the financials to secure a loan. She knew everything. I read the emails, my heart pounding. It was all there, proof that Vanessa had been complicit in the fraud. Send this to Sarah, I said, anonymously. The next morning, Sarah's article hit the web. Sterling Enterprises scandal deepens. CEO's wife implicated in fraud. The evidence was damning, and Vanessa's carefully crafted image crumbled overnight. Social media erupted, with people calling her out, demanding accountability. I watched it unfold from my office, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Daniel and Vanessa had built their lives on lies, and now the world knew it. One morning, I received an unexpected email. It was from a lawyer representing Daniel, requesting a meeting. Not a negotiation, not a confrontation, just a conversation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe, neutral ground, far from the corporate battlefields we'd fought on. Daniel looked different. Older, somehow, his face lined with stress, his eyes tired. He sat across from me, stirring his coffee, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think you'd come, he said finally. I almost didn't, I replied, my voice cool. What do you want, Daniel? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did to you, to us. I was wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years. I waited for the anger, the bitterness, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt nothing. His apology was too late, too small for the pain he'd caused. Thank you, I said, my tone neutral. But it doesn't change anything. He nodded, as if he'd expected that. I know. I needed to say it. We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers who'd once shared a life. Then I stood, leaving my coffee untouched. Goodbye, Daniel, I said, and walked away. Flashback to the night I launched Phoenix Ventures. The office was a mess of pizza boxes and empty coffee cups, my team exhausted but elated. We'd done the impossible, turning a dream into reality. As we toasted to our future, Clara had pulled me aside, her eyes shining. You're not just surviving anymore, she'd said. You're living. That moment had marked a turning point. I wasn't just fighting against Daniel. I was fighting for myself, for the life I deserved. And now, as I walked away from him for the last time, I felt that truth settle into my bones. The following week, I announced the Eleanor Kane Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs. The launch event was packed, with investors, media, and women from all walks of life. I stood on the stage, sharing my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a builder, a force. When I was at my lowest, I said, my voice steady, I thought I'd lost everything. But I learned that you can rebuild, that you can rise stronger than before. This foundation is for every woman who's been told she's not enough. You are, and we're here to help you prove it. The applause was deafening, but it was the faces in the crowd that stayed with me. Women like the one I'd been, their eyes bright with hope. This was my legacy, not Daniel's downfall. This was what mattered. Months later, Phoenix Ventures was named one of the top companies to watch. The foundation was already funding its first round of grants, and I was planning a global expansion. Clara, Marcus, and Priya were by my side, my family in every way that counted. One evening, as I worked late, Clara stopped by, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To you, she said, raising hers. The woman who didn't just win, she changed the game. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. To us, I said. To the future. As we drank, I looked out at the city skyline, its lights a map of possibilities. Daniel was gone, a footnote in my story. I was Eleanor Kane, and I was just getting started. The negotiation table had been my battlefield, but it was also my proving ground. I'd faced my past, reclaimed my power, and built something unstoppable. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just enough. I was everything.